Okay, as Ashishda told me to give my own introduction, I'm Jaijit Bhattacharya and I work for Hewlett Packard as their director for South Asia. So I'll quickly go into the issues itself. And sir, how much time?
Maybe 7 to 8 minutes. But everybody, fortunately, everybody is present.
Yeah. That's good. So we'll have a plethora of ideas being shared. So essentially, we'll go back to first principles very quickly and see what is e-governance. I'm sure it's been repeated many number of times. But essentially, e-governance is adopted for good governance, which is to enhance the quality of life of citizens while improving the internal and external security and reducing cost of running the government and increasing the revenue collected by the government. That essentially is what good governance is. And that gets translated into this kind of a picture. Basically, it's coming from Arthashastra, so it's nothing new that we're talking about. This is exactly what Arthashastra talks about, and that's what e-governance is about. If you look at the drivers of e-governance, again, very clearly, if you see what's going on, especially at this stage in the economy, there is very poor infrastructure, which is leading to low investment formation, which is leading to low wages, low employment, low consumption, low motivation, and therefore low productivity. If there's low productivity, there's low profits. You can see the taxation is going down, tax collected is going down. And if taxes are going down, you can't build more roads. That's a vicious cycle, right? So if you are not able to put in more investments into the infrastructure, you cannot get more out of the economy, you cannot have more taxes. One of the ways of getting out of this was to borrow more money, and we had the Asian financial crisis, then we had many more crises following that Asian financial crisis. We can see the Greek government borrowing through their nose to run the government. Clearly, borrowing is not a sustainable mechanism. And that's where e-governance steps in, which tries to make the government more efficient, thereby releasing the money which can then be used for building hospitals, building schools, and building anything else that's needed. So that's basically is what the principal driver of e-governance is to take out the cost of running the government. So what was happening essentially till about a couple of years back is what we call as eGov 1.0. What is eGov 1.0? Essentially transplanting the brick and mortar government into a computerized government. You copy what's happening in real life and you do not use the power of internet. You do not leverage what IT can bring in. And there are many, many such examples which leads to leakage happening. And if somebody calls up and says, my LPG cylinder has not been delivered, or somebody calls up and says, I've not got my gun license in the last 2 months. It's taken 2 months to get my gun license. Now, if you can find out whether this person is under the BPL list also through the power of IT, you can then pretty much realize that this person cannot afford a gun if he's under BPL, because a gun is a pretty expensive equipment. So if you can have this cross-integration of systems of the government, you can stop having the leakages in the government system. And we are therefore not using the power of IT. There's continued limited indirect participation of the citizens. In fact, if you are sitting through the next session, we'll talk about the impact of that on the citizen itself through the session on e-politics. That we are electing people, we're electing our MPs, thereafter we do not have a say in the government. And that should change, and that's what is eGov 2.0. There's absence of pure play e-governance solutions. In the commercial world, you got a Google.com. It's got no equivalent in the real brick and mortar world. We don't have anything similar in eGov. There's a need, there's a crying need, but we don't have that. There's no significant cross-departmental solution. There's limited process reengineering that does not necessarily leverage the full power of IT. It's devoid of Web 2.0 tools, and there's no focus on SOA. That's a pun intended. Those who are in IT would know SOA means service-oriented architecture. We're talking about service-oriented administration. What we have is a tax-oriented administration. We are not looking at the ability to use IT and the monopoly over data that the government has to actually garner extra revenues. And therefore, you can have a service-oriented administration which can actually get revenue because of the special services delivered. We still have focus on taxation being the primary source of revenue. And therefore, we have the emergence of what we call as eGov 2.0, which is an evolutionary step towards a more efficient, inclusive, and participative government through adoption of a set of new trends in business models, operational models, financial models, and technological models. And these are the opportunities that we're talking about. So we talked about the challenges, and these are pretty much the opportunities, and that's what we need to create in order to move forward. I'll very quickly go into some of these models. So what is the eGov business model? What's the eGov 2.0 business model? Why can't we have the entire property exchange being put into place? Why do we have to depend on brokers? Why do we have to depend on people to whom a 1%, 2% is paid? If the government sets up an entire system wherein you can find the buyers, like the stock market, do the mutation, do the sales deed, do the mutation, do the transfer of deed, and take out the problems of a deed-based registration system that we have in land records and kind of make it a semi-title-based system, we also take out a lot of inconvenience from the courts, because 70% of the courts in the civil courts is because of land records related issues. So we unclog the courts, we make it much easier for people to buy property, and it also adds revenue to the government, and more importantly, it has an impact on limiting the flow of black money. And I'll not go into those details, but one can figure out what the impact is. Similarly, vehicle exchanges. Similarly, there are similar, zillion other things. If you buy a car, how do you know you're not buying a car which has been used as a murder vehicle? If you're selling your scooter, how do you know tomorrow it's not going to be used to plant a bomb somewhere? And the name gets linked to you, and the name is not transferred. How do you clear the ownership of any of these vehicles? The government has a monopoly on this data, and therefore just having one step forward and creating a few layers of systems will enable a significant amount of revenue for the government, a huge amount of benefit for the citizens, therefore happiness of the citizens, and increased security. All the three things that we talked about right in the beginning. Similarly, a whole bunch of other models. For the sake of time, I'll skip and move forward. Here is what we're talking about in terms of electronic land and property exchange. There have been articles that have come out in Economic Times. We have done detailed work in Karnataka to find out exactly how it can be done. It is highly possible under the Indian system to actually do what we're talking about. And we have the expertise. We are running one of the largest stock exchanges in the world. Millions of dollars worth of transactions happening every day. Why is that we can't do the same with land records? Yes, it's non-trivial, but nothing can be as simple. One has to put in the effort to make sure that one can do and bring these systems into existence. Similarly, we need new eGov operational models. Very often we see what are the service level agreements given to vendors is, well, if computers have to be supplied and maintained, the service level agreement is that the computer, if it's in a urban location in the school, then the downtime cannot be more than 24 hours. If it's in a non-motorable road connectivity situation, then it cannot be down for more than 7 days. And they're very well maintained. The vendors respond very well, the SLAs are done very well. The point is, what is the outcome? Shouldn't the SLA be how many school children pass out with the IT skills rather than figuring out whether the wires have been plugged properly? And then the crux of the point comes in that, well, teachers are not available to teach computer science and computers and so on. Therefore, the SLA itself has been architected incorrectly. So the operational models have to change, the regulatory framework has to change. Who is responsible for, let's say, if we put in a cloud system for Delhi Metro Rail Corporation, who is responsible if the cloud goes down for 2 minutes and the metro stops? We don't have a legislative framework to ensure that privacy is maintained, loss of data is well taken care of, that there is responsibility attached, and that the government also takes up a service level agreement when it's given to a private sector. We are doing a layering of the government by putting another layer in front of the government and saying, here is a private sector that will come in, but the private sector cannot give a service level agreement to the end user unless the government gives it in the back. And those evolution and those maturity have to come in as we move forward. Then there are a whole bunch of eGov financial models. Again, the basic principle is that if we are saying that we can have a public-private partnership in e-governance, that means there is a disproportionate amount of value in that particular project. And if that project succeeds, that means there was a value. By public-private partnership, we generally mean public is the government and private is a private party. The real public is not involved, they're never involved. Why can't we have a mechanism through which larger citizens can be involved in creation of those special purpose vehicles? Can we get them in through the stock market, through various other kinds of financial mechanisms? And again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to the details of it. There are many, many such mechanisms that we can get in. Why does the government allow advertisement-driven models in the government systems? Why is taxpayer money being used when there is huge amount of possibility of advertisement actually funding the government projects? Why can't some framework be put into place? So there are many other ways to do e-governance which currently we are not exploring. And finally, the whole concept of eGov technology models, that itself has to change. It cannot be the static server has an application gets delivered over the internet, over the networks, and citizen uses it. The technology has changed it very, very significantly. We need to have democratization of technology, otherwise we'll end up in having people who have access to government and those who don't have access to government. Because those who don't know English or those who don't have access to the internet will not get the services. I'm currently looking at Facebook where there's a cartoon on irctc.com. I don't know how many of you have booked on IRCTC. How many of you have used irctc.com? Are you aware of it? What's your experience? Very good, nice. Yeah. Sorry? Average? How long did you have to wait on it? Right. That's when all the Tatkal tickets are getting booked. So there's something wrong in that system, right? So this cartoon shows that, you have to forever wait. You put the credit card in, you don't know whether the transaction is going through or not, and shows somebody's, balancing themselves on a thin rope connecting two buildings, and it says that's what IRCTC is. You don't know whether the transaction has gone through or not, whether your credit card is charged or not. You don't know whether you can get the ticket or not. So in those kind of situations, you need to have elasticity of the system itself. You need to have, like at 8 o'clock in the morning, more CPUs being pressed in. Those are different requirements that we have, and therefore the kind of technological models we need are significantly different. So if you look at the techno-commercial challenges, you look at the kind of problem you just mentioned, 8 o'clock in the morning, IRCTC doesn't work. Does that mean it has to invest far more number of systems to just take care of the 8 o'clock traffic? Well, perhaps there are other kinds of models. The other problems that we see is there's no IT cadre for supporting the government systems within the government. It's very limited cadre that is there. There's huge amount of cost, huge amount of complexity. There is challenges in terms of managing the information security and sanitization and so on. Very clearly, if you look at a solution, cloud becomes a very, very straightforward, no-brainer solution. And the point is that if it's a no-brainer solution, why are we not adopting it? I think it's high time that we should start adopting cloud in e-governance. And there have been many other governments which have adopted cloud, and those are new models that have come in. And obviously, there are challenges to even adopting cloud and some of the challenges out there. So what are we talking about when we went through all these models, eGov 2.0, all these challenges? We're basically coming back and talking about the three principles that whatever we do, if it's IT, BT, whatever, at the end of the day, the three pillars of governance should get supported. Thank you.